Well, I want to have a little bit more to say about land and planning for the future, and in relation to the Draupnir strategy, if you're following that. And how far, or how soon rather, are we actually able potentially to get out of this system? We can become more and more self-reliant with every step and every generation we take. But how soon can we truly be 100% self-reliant? And it's going to come back down to land acquisition. Now, sooner or later, if you're following the Draupnir strategy, I want to make something clear about that too, is that it's not a long-term sustainable growth rate. It has to slow down sooner or later. What it is meant to do is boost our numbers rapidly until we are able to, shall we say, support each other, support our own families, have our own families supporting each other in every way possible. Because there are certain aspects of life and survival that we require large numbers for, which if we seek to take a certain path today with the numbers that we're at right now, with limited unity across the world, we will be stomped out. There are certain avenues we can't go down right now because we will most certainly lose. This is a numbers building process. So that's what this is for. But what we need to do, and wherever we end up, however far down the road we end up getting, everything is all about land acquisition and resources. Every war ever fought on the planet, it all comes back down to land holding, fighting over land and resources. I don't care what the war is or what it's supposed to be about, it's ultimately for resources. Ideology wars are ideologies about who gets to have the land, which is the most valuable resource land there is. Whether it be through trade or through farming, it's all about resources. So your ability and access to resources should be your priority. Yeah, there are going to be people standing in your way, and you need to overcome these people. But you cannot do that without resources, without land to obtain these resources. So, with that said, growth rates. Now, I said in the last video that 1 acre will feed 2 people, and I still stand by that. This is true. But what I would suggest, if you're following the Draupnir strategy or whatever strategy you want to go with, you need to at least try and provide 1 acre for every son you have. Let's just assume, for simplicity's sake, that you're only having sons. For every son you have, or aim to have, you should at least have 1 acre for each of them. So that means if you're having 9 children, you need to acquire at least 10 acres, because of course you need to feed yourself and your wife. But if you do this only gets your children a little bit ahead. They're not out the door. They're not out of the system. Because if you want them to have the 9 children, that means you want to have 81 grandchildren. Well, where's the 81 acres to feed each one of your grandsons and their wives? That's why I suggest 1 acre per son, so that they can at least feed a woman when they're starting their family. But each generation is going to require more land, aren't they? If you look at the numbers and we go through the stats, you've got 9 sons, 81 grandsons, which will lead to 729 great-grandsons. how far ahead are you going to be able to get in your lifetime to supply for however many children? Even if you can get to the next stage and you manage to acquire 6,561 acres for your great-great-grandchildren. What next? Well, if they carry on forward from here, what are the 59,049 great-great-great-grandchildren of yours going to eat off? Where is their food going to come from, and how are you going to pay for and acquire that land? If you only set up for 3 or 4 generations, which is still pretty damn good, mind you, don't get me wrong. If you manage to provide 6,500 acres or even 60,000 acres to set your great-great-great-grandchildren up, what about the next generation? You don't want to get all of these descendants of yours out of the system only to, in 6 generations, be going, okay, how am I going to feed the next generation? Because after that, we're looking at 500,000 plus people. At some point, you're going to meet resistance and failure, of course. But let's assume that everything goes well. How are you going to support this? So the Draupnir strategy is, of course, not a long-term, self-sustainable breeding project. But it needs to be sustainable short-term, that's for sure. Absolutely. By the time you get 6 or 7 generations deep into all this, if you succeed, keep in mind this is just my children, or just your children, if you do this to success. 7 generations, you're looking at 500,000 people, just your children, just your direct descendants. So how are you going to support this? I think it's a bad idea to set up too far ahead only for them to be going, how do we get any further forward? I would suggest, and the reality I think is that your children, your first generation children, are probably going to have to work and do something similar to what you've done within the system. But don't worry, as far as you can get ahead in your life, make it the quota or the goal or the objective of your next generation to set up 1 generation further again. So let's just say you're moderately successful and you manage to acquire, let's say, thereabouts 800 acres, which is enough to feed your great-great-grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, 729 of them, plus your 81 grandchildren, plus your 9 children. It's 819 acres, plus the 1 for yourself, so 820 acres. Let's say you can do that in your lifetime. Well, make your children, the next generation, make their ambition as a group effort, because they're going to have more support from each other than you've presumably had or have. 9 brothers working together are going to be far more effective than just 9 individual men working by themselves. So if you've done the 800, well, tell them, make their objective to, between themselves, find the 6,000, because then they've set up, or the 6,500, whatever it needs to be, 6,561. Because then, and I mean each, if they can each find that many acres between themselves. So you've actually got a jump start ahead for the next 2 generations thereafter. Well, it's actually way more than that. And we're weaning our children out of the system rather than just extracting them and pretty much experimenting with how children of slaves are going to be raised when they're not slaves themselves. It's probably good for them to experience some of the things that we've experienced, but with better guidance and upbringing than what we've had. I wish I knew now when I was a child. I'd do everything so much differently. So imagine how your children are going to be when you educate them the right way. Imagine how their children are going to be when they're educated the right way thanks to your guidance. And education is the next video. That's what I really want to get onto next. But I think that makes sense, so I'm going to stop there. Thanks for listening.